Welcome everybody. Welcome to the panel discussion on the vision and views of CEOs of international businesses. Again, I'm sorry that you can't join us here in Dublin, although you will have the opportunity again in 2023, so we can look forward to that. But right around us at the moment in Trinity College, on one side of the campus, which is located in the center of the city, we have the International Financial Services Center, and that hosts a huge amount of businesses from the financial sector, and increasingly with Brexit occurring, there's been a lot of new businesses moving operations into that center. And then behind the campus, in the Grand Canal Dock area, an area that has become known as the digital capital of Europe. We have the European headquarters of a number of global digital companies, including Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, and so on. And it's become a big center, and closely in close proximity to that also we have Microsoft with their largest operation outside of Seattle, with the full suite of services there. In that operation, in fact, the only unit outside of Seattle that has that, but basically a very big international industry base in Dublin. But also, as many of you know, Ireland is a small economy, and therefore any of the indigenous businesses based in Ireland who are ambitious usually have to look to go international very early on, and many are indeed born international. So also from an Irish indigenous point of view, we have a very big international focus, and of course these days with digital business and with climate change, we're all interlinked anyway. So today's panel, we're going to look at addressing some of these issues, and I want to give a big thanks to our panel who are giving up some of their Saturday to come and join us. So let me introduce you to the panel. We have Danny McCoy, who's the CEO of Ibec, the Irish Business and Employers Confederation. So that's the industry organization for Irish industry. We have Imelda Hurley, who's the CEO of Coillte, and Coillte are the biggest forestry company in Ireland. They look after 7% of the land of Ireland, and also play a big role in the sustainability agenda of the Irish government. We also have Katrina Harahan. Katrina is managing director of Microsoft Ireland, and as I mentioned earlier, outside of Seattle, and the Dublin operation of Microsoft is the only Microsoft operation globally that has the full suite of activities of the parent organization in Seattle. So a very big operation here in Dublin. And then we also have John Hurley, and John Hurley is vice president and managing director for EMEA, and also for Latin America for LinkedIn. And previously, John was also the European CEO of Google. So very much covering the digital side of things as well. So I'm going to start the session by handing over to Danny. And Danny, can you give us a 360 view of business in Dublin and Ireland, but in particularly business with an international focus?
Yeah, thanks very much, Andrew, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Danny McCoy. I'm the CEO of Ibec, as Andrew introduced. So we're the business representative organization for what is, per capita, probably the biggest business footprint globally operates from the Irish economy. And I just want to give you kind of a sense of where that came from. Ibec itself has over 38 different trade associations reflective of the type of businesses that are here, from biopharma, medtech, tech, food and drink, forestry with Imelda there, right across the kind of swathe of individual component parts of that. So we get to see quite a strong overview. My own background is in academia, and maybe to give a kind of a framework for our conversation today, most national economies would have a competitiveness council. And normally that's kind of a buildup of a pyramid of an objective. The objective might be sustainable growth, or now might be sustainable development. But just underneath that, there's the outputs, the type of productivity, the costs, the employment levels, the business performance. This is kind of in the Porter type analysis. But underneath that, again, you'd have the inputs, which would be the notion that you'd have clusters of activities, which I think will come true in the conversation today. We see clustering on the tech. John and Katrina can give evidence of that. We also see it in the food and drink and a more agri-based products as well. Imelda, I think, would be able to give us quite a great insight on how that's built up. But also then is the physical infrastructure in terms of, now in modernity, what we're like in terms of broadband and technology and the kind of structures of whether it's 4G heading to 5G. But in addition, there's the knowledge and talent, and that'll be the other issue, which I'm sure Andrew can give voice to with Trinity College and the type of ecosystem from training to education. But all the way along in these pyramids, there's always essential conditions to start this. And so there can be many different frames, but fundamentally, the type of essential conditions for the whole thing to operate is really about institutions, about the macroeconomic stability, and then about the endowments. And just building from that very briefly, is that some of the things that you'll observe about the Irish economy, which is now in a spectacular phase of its development. So for instance, there's no economy on earth that's experienced what Ireland's experienced in the last 6 years. Our GDP, this measure of economic activity, has grown by 100%. It's doubled. And so no normal economy can do that. Extraordinary economies do, but something fundamental must have happened during those 6 years. And that's actually around that endowment point. Most societies developed on the basis of natural resources. They may have had coal, gas, or oil. Ireland didn't have that. Ireland was an agrarian-based society. Mainly what we had was grass. And that actually was our agri-food. Our main activity during the 20th century was exporting live things. People, tragically, in terms of immigration. So we have a very low population base. The Republic's 5 million people, but also live animals. And they were basically the main trading part of Ireland right up to the start of us joining the European Union. The endowment that we have now is in the move from tangible assets to intangible assets, where we see the world is now driven by intangible assets in balance sheets. These are patents, copyrights, branding. We see that Ireland is absolutely a frontier economy, and that transformation is a result of the institutions that we have and the stability, the macroeconomic stability, which is provided by the European Union membership in terms of the guardrails for keeping our public finances in order. We've had problems in terms of our public finance stability. 10 years ago, we had quite a big financial crash, but increasingly through our time, we've always had this oscillations of macroeconomic policy, public finance problems. But the one thing we've had that's been very strong is the institutions. On becoming a separate entity from the United Kingdom over 100 years ago now, or about 100 years ago, we were left with a good civil service structure, a good taxation structure, but also institutions that have impact on our education and training, like the religious orders would have been in charge of our education and health system. Those institutions have many problems, obviously, in modernity, but they actually gave us stability in terms of the educational standards that moved through for us. What I said was ultimately Irish people to emigrate. Thankfully, in this generation, that's been reversed. Population is rising. And so we're seeing that reflective in the nature of the type of businesses that are in Ireland right now. The other institutions, the common law legal system and the resolution and dispute resolution, but also the sociological factors about Ireland is that property rights are really well protected. And that's why foreign direct investment will be secure about making very large investments that wouldn't have a problem of changing government attitudes towards it. So that certainty gave the bedrock. In the 360, just to finish off, as Andrew said, Ireland doesn't have all its eggs in one basket. It's quite a strong domestic market now because the people have ended up being rich. So there is capacity for imports actually being the driver of a lot of activity when we talk about Brexit later on. It's not just about exports anymore. Exports are very important for a developing economy. Arguably, Ireland has arrived with living standards, and income levels, disposable income levels, which are now the highest in the EU bar Luxembourg. And so given that the EU is such a strong part of the world, that means these are world-class living standards with world-class businesses. The nature of the clusters and sophistication, which the guys will be able to give better expression to, are around biopharma, medtech, tech, food and drink. But also there are niche markets, some disrupted by COVID, like aircraft. Aviation has always been a very strong part of the Irish proposition, particularly aircraft leasing. So when you look at the combination, it's spread right across lots of activities, and many indigenous multinational companies are now evident. Ryanair being the most B2C type brand in Europe as an airline, but also we see the Kerry Group, the Glanbia Group, CRH, which would be probably by headcount one of the largest Irish entities with approximately 90,000 employees, 65,000 of those in North America alone. So it's become a real platform and a base and widely spread. So I'll stop at that point, Andrew.
Great, thank you, Danny. And no doubt we'll return to some of these areas in the questions. And I should have mentioned already that we're going to run through a number of areas ourselves in terms of that we're going to explore on the panel. But we are reserving time for your questions. So if you have any questions for the panel, then please put them up on the system, and we can address those. Yeah, I guess you'll get a question on taxation at some point, Danny. So, okay, so let's move on to Imelda. Imelda, do you want your outlook? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to have the opportunity to speak with you. I'm going to talk very briefly about my background, talk about Coillte. It's an organisation that I know many wouldn't have heard of, so to give you perspective on that. And looking forward in terms of business, just very briefly, I am a business studies graduate and accountant by background, and over the course of my career, I have spent 15 years in public companies, very much allied in many ways to what Danny spoke about in farm to fork, so very much about companies where we figure out how best to grow crops in the most efficient way, and indeed how we deliver the best possible food to the shelves of supermarkets and food service outlets. I've also spent a couple of years in a Silicon Valley-backed business based in Hong Kong and China around the technology sector and delivering technology products for worldwide brands. I have over time also sat on a number of boards, both public company and semi-state. And today my executive role is to be the CEO of Coillte. I'm in the role just over a year. And what Coillte is we are a commercial semi-state, so we are custodian of 7% of the lands of Ireland. That's over 1 million acres, and about 90% of those lands are forested lands. Coillte itself is 30 years old, and we would recognise the organisation has changed and evolved a massive amount over the 30 years. And many would expect that a forestry business doesn't change, but I can assure you that many of the themes that Danny spoke about just a moment ago in terms of technology and intangible assets are really important in our business today. To give you a sense of what we do with our land, so we are the largest forester in Ireland. We supply about 75% of the timber that's processed to Irish sawmills, and over half of that is ultimately exported to the UK, some into Europe, and indeed some as far away as the US. In addition to that, we're the largest provider of outdoor recreation in the country, and we've seen a massive increase in our visitor numbers and social expectations of us because of the type of organisation we are, particularly this year as a result of COVID. We enable a large amount of wind energy on our lands, so very much positioned in the renewable energy space, and we recognise by virtue of the lands and the remote nature, some of them they're particularly suited, and they're in upland areas, so particularly suited to wind energy. And in addition to that, as with any business, there are residues from forestry and indeed from sawmills. So we are a bioeconomy in many ways, and we have two factories that process chip and pulp and ultimately deliver MDF and OSB. And through all of this year, interestingly, and to the surprise of many, we have been an essential service, including during a very tight lockdown. in April and May of this year. There are about 12,000 jobs enabled across the timber industry, and it was really important that we kept going if we were an essential service. As I look forward, and a year in the business, it gives me a real lens, which has allowed me to get to know the business, look back, but also look forward. Forestry and Coillte, could not be more relevant than ever before. The recognition of the need to be a sustainable business, and I would say the need for businesses generally to really recognize the climate challenge, recognize sustainability, and make the decision that you're either going to grasp the challenges of sustainability and you're going to shape your business, or you're going to be shaped. And certainly from our point of view, we are very clear that science has evolved over the last 30 years and has evolved over centuries. And we know more today about what it is to do good business in forestry and to optimize the lands that we are custodian of in the best possible way. And we recognize that sustainability is about not only climate change, but actually the biodiversity emergency that we're also facing. We also recognize that as we look forward, and indeed as business look forward, there are changes in the way we all live and the way we work. And in order for our business, but for businesses generally to be an employer of choice going forward, we have to recognize what the future of work is going to be about, and how we can take the best of what we've learned, particularly this year, and innovate to ultimately go forward. And the other thing that I build as I think about all of this is that our business is very intergenerational, and it will feel like our role can be to take the assets of today and pass them on to tomorrow. We are custodians of an intergenerational asset, and it goes right back to the sustainability and bioeconomy point. We need to ensure that the learnings that are very much driven by science, but also by technology, that we take those and we pass the intergenerational asset that is trees, in our case, and lands, but also actually the planet, onto the next generation in a better way than perhaps we took it over. And I think that is a huge challenge for business more generally. That is something that we have to ensure that we are all doing, because ultimately our role in life and in society can be in part about doing the best for today, but I think we also have to absolutely focus on tomorrow. So with that, I'll pause and look forward to catching up again later.
Great, thanks, Imelda. I think it's if I think of any industry that sort of evolved from something that sort of was regarded as a kind of one of the primary industries in terms of the products it produces, to one that we all now rely on, not only to tackle the climate change, but it's great to hear you talk about the biodiversity. I mean, I think it's not just sustainable business, but indeed our survival really depends on performance of companies like yours. So keep up the good work. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to now to Katrina Harahan from Microsoft. Katrina.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here with you today. As Andrew said, Microsoft has been committed to Ireland for over 35 years now. We started out as a manufacturing facility back in 1985 with an initial investment of 100 employees. And just the other week, I had the pleasure of announcing the creation of 200 new engineering roles, which brings our employee base now to 2,700 here in Ireland. We also announced the opening of a new engineering hub following a 27 million euro redesign that places engineers at its core. And that new facility is a great addition to our campus, which we opened back in 2018 at One Microsoft Place. And this is our new home to a growing team. It delivers an inspiring and accessible environment for all of us to innovate and learn from one another. And it's a space that we want our growing team to play a central role in creating new technologies and developing cloud services for customers that will help reimagine Ireland's future and will empower our customers globally. At the heart of our new engineering hub is a garage space, which is a concept well known and established in Microsoft's Seattle campus, but it's actually the first of its kind outside of Seattle. And it's a space where our employees have the freedom to innovate, to fail, to learn, and to experiment on projects that they are passionate about. It really is a fantastic space that we're looking forward to not just welcoming our own colleagues back, but having customers and the community members come in and enjoy the experience of creating new things and dreaming about the future. Our decision to invest further in Ireland is a testament to the creativity and ingenuity within our Irish-based team, but also to Ireland Inc. and the talent pool and the business environment that we've created in this country. I myself have been working for Microsoft for over 35 years now. And during that time, Microsoft as a company and Ireland as a country has both transformed. Ireland's now recognised as a digital hub for Europe. It's the home of nearly 1/3 of Europe's data, the top 5 global software companies, and a thriving ecosystem. This enviable position is as a result of decades of policymakers and industry leaders working together for the benefit of all. This year has been unlike anything we could have imagined. In our personal and professional lives, we have been pushed to the limit. I mean, cloud and digital technologies have helped to keep the economy open and have supported our healthcare workers, have ensured our continued access to learning for young people, and importantly, has supported the amazing work of NGOs who are looking after the most vulnerable in our communities. So while we've truly come together as one to tackle the societal impact of COVID, we now must face the economic challenges posed by the pandemic. And it's a time now to rebuild and to recover and to reimagine Ireland. Out of this difficult year, we have seen some fantastic innovation and amazing responses from individuals and organizations. Great ideas together with great technology has positioned us well to navigate the past 10 months, and it's given us a firm foundation that we can start to grow in the new year. The rapid transformation of businesses have experienced in this year will continue to operate in this virtual environment has been sometimes overwhelming for those making the decisions. At Microsoft, we've seen customers transforming their operations in an 8-week period, transformations that ordinarily would take years to achieve. So this year has taught us all that the right mindset can really achieve anything. Scientists have come together all over the world with the result that we now have a number of vaccines created in record time. So as we look forward to the future, we have to be optimistic about the role of technology in helping us all to achieve more and reach our goals. As a company, we've focused on living out our mission, which is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. The rapid digital transformation that we've witnessed to date this year continues, and we want to ensure that everyone is equipped with the skills to fully participate in the Ireland of today and of tomorrow. Through our Dream Space experience, which is an education hub that we've created at our campus in Leopardstown, we continue to find new ways to engage with primary and secondary school students to help them experience the new digital era. We launched this initiative in 2018 through an experiential centre in the company had committed to for those students, but also for teachers with the opportunity to interact with technology and discover how it influences the world around them and the future. At DreamSpace, young people engage in a digital skills experience which has been created to inspire them to unlock their ambition, spark their creativity, and kind of supercharge their ideas. It's grounded in innovation teaching practices, and DreamSpace was developed by and is led by teachers, with an estimated 70% of future jobs requiring skills in the field of STEM, coding, computer science, data analytics, AI, computational thinking. It's important that we really do rethink education and prepare students for the future. So over the last year, Microsoft's invested in that DreamSpace initiative, rolling it out into the regions, hosting a series of pop-up events when we could travel into counties like Munster, Ulster, Connacht, to give students the opportunity to have the experience rather than having to travel to our campus in Dublin. The company's also announced a 10-year partnership with W5, the Science and Discovery Centre in Belfast, to try and bring that DreamSpace experience to students in Northern Ireland. Not only has this given every student, parent and teacher the opportunity to learn new skills, we've also brought Dream Space into the home and created a home space experience during the pandemic. It is providing guidance and tools to equip parents and teachers with the skills they need to support their children and students in today's remote learning environment. As the schools have reopened, the Dream Space experience has gone virtual, so that we can access more schools and engage to help them engage in the Dream Space experience for the future. Microsoft's commitment to skills is really about skilling the economy for the future. We're seeing so many people being impacted by the pandemic, whether it's in the hospitality industry or it's in retail. And we want to give them the opportunity to reskill and to have relevant technology capability for the future. The future looks bright, and we should be excited about the opportunities that this difficult period has given to us to learn, to expand and to explore what those future opportunities. And we're seeing some great innovative solutions coming out of small Indigenous companies, startups, collaborating with large industry and with academia. And I look forward to what that will bring in the future. So I'm going to pause there and hand it back to you, Andrew.
Great, thank you, Katrina. And I think there's a lot of people in the audience who are doing research on the development of ecosystems and how they operate and so on. So I've if anyone wants to ask any questions, as I say, please fire them in. Okay, I'm going to now hand over to John Hurley. John.
Andrew, thank you very much, and a virtual welcome to everybody to Dublin. I hope you're enjoying the conference, and I'm delighted to be with you here today and sharing the podium with such an impressive cast of characters. My name is John Hurley, and I lead LinkedIn's business across Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. I'm one of these people who normally lives here at the weekend and is on a flight that goes out either on a Sunday night or a Monday morning and tries to get back here on a Thursday or Friday. As you can imagine, my world has rapidly changed since March of 2020, and I haven't been near an airport in 8 months. And in many ways, I think there were some kind of remarkable points made by both Katrina and Imelda in terms about change and how companies have embraced it. We're no different to that, and in many ways had to fundamentally change how we operated. So I work with LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is a company which has about 725 million members across 200 countries. 34 million job seekers come to LinkedIn every week, and there are about 55 job applications made every second on our platform. So what's happening in kind of real time is LinkedIn has a pretty remarkable view of kind of the global labor market. Because in many ways, there are 5 real dimensions that we think about. We think about the member, the individual who's searching for a job, the company that's actually offering them a job. What is the job itself? A digital rendition of that job. What skills are needed to acquire the job? And what are the educational institutions that provide those skills? And when you kind of get that sort of kind of a data set of those 5 dimensions for the 725 million members who are searching at that rate, we tend to get a remarkable kaleidoscope view of the skills needed to succeed in the 21st century. And in many ways, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to enable professionals to, in effect, make them more productive and successful. And through that, we kind of take a picture. What that then enables us to do is to work with the policy setters. And I think you heard from Danny in the first instance and Katrina as well about how important in Ireland the policy setting has been. Like if you look back to why we have been so successful as a nation that's transformed, as Danny so aptly put it, from an agrarian society to today a very, very modern society, was what we did was we very smart policymakers. And those policymakers worked with data. Now, today, the types of data that we can offer people is much more real time than might have been available 20 years ago. But I think what we've had is this kind of Irish ability to understand data quickly, to understand what it means, and then to use that data to anticipate what people need to do or what the policy setters needed to do to put in place the environment and the infrastructure to enable companies to come here. And in many ways, what we're doing as a company in the whole area of labour market is kind of what Ireland as a country has done in the whole area of how to be nimble and how to react to opportunities that are out there. And one of the things that we've noticed as well today is that the world is kind of about succeeding today is about skills, not just only about qualifications, because in many ways, many of the qualifications of the past may miss out some of the skills that are becoming so necessary today. And in many ways, when we start to think about what the world of work looks like, the world of work is really changing right in front of our very, very eyes. And you know, it used to be a point in time where, you know, life had three phases. We had a phase of education, we had a phase of work, and we had a phase of retirement. But that presupposed that we all were going to kind of leave work in late 50s, early 60s, and probably die a couple of years later. The reality today, with huge advances in medicine, individuals would probably live to be 100, and many of the incoming college classes may well go to 110, 115, which fundamentally says that we as individuals need to understand and have almost a Swiss Army knife of skills, because those skills will be used at various points in time as we actually move through a career. In many ways, that's what we're trying to do from a LinkedIn point of view, and hugely leveraging off the Microsoft technology stack. You know, what Katrina has put forward is Microsoft has always been at the front end of thinking about the future, and many of the type of innovative ideas that she has put in place the kind of primary school children, secondary school children to see, you know, the types of skills that they're going to need. We then kind of come further when professionals are out there in the marketplace. And in many ways, many of these issues then come back to Ireland. Why has Ireland been successful over the last number of years in kind of bringing this kind of cluster of companies together? Well, I'd say in the first instance, post-Second World War, as US companies started to come towards Europe, in the first instance, IBM came here in the 1950s. And in the early 1980s, we had Intel. And then from that, a series of companies came, they landed. But what happened really importantly was they expanded. And in business, what's really important is that you start with an account and the account grows. But Katrina has described how Microsoft has been here for 35 years. That's remarkable in the modern world of technology for a company to come and start with a group of 100 and 35 years later to be launching new products and new services. And that comes to this whole area of land and expand. You make it better. Each time, each new generation, each group of people who come add to the collective capability of the organization. You start to put that then, and then our physical location, you know, 5 hours from New York, and by 5-6 hours by flight, 5 hours from a time zone, but a superb location to integrate with various parts of the United States. The one English language speaking part of the Eurozone. And then at the turn of the 20th century, we had the benefit of the Global Crossing fiber optic cable, which brought and made this whole area the basis of placing data here possible. So Ireland had, again, through great policy initiatives that were put together in the 90s, the last 10 years of the previous century, making long-term bets. Those long-term bets put the ability then to actually move that data. That then became the basis where other businesses came and influenced. And through those series of things, what's happened is companies were built, and what was built was an incredible professional managerial class. And that leadership class then became, maybe they spent 10 years at a Microsoft or 10 years at Google, and then they went off and they led the next range of companies. And what we've seen is, you know, even in the last year, like astonishing growth by TikTok. And TikTok have added 1,100 employees in Dublin in 11 months at a rate of 100 a month. And they publicly stated they're going to about 4,000 people next year. And again, that comes about because you actually have myriads of management capability that have been involved in scaling other technology companies. They've got, you know, they've made the mistakes, they've learned, and they do it better each time. When you start to put that together with this whole area of Irish ability to kind of deal with ambiguity and the nuances of situations, I think what you do is you kind of build a very, very strong destination where people learn to react to change, to embrace change, and to drive it. And one of the other things that's happened over the last number of years is Ireland then has become a great place for people from further and further east to come to Ireland as a landing spot on their way to California. And one of the things that's been happening is through the technology companies here, many people have come, and after spending 6, 8, 10 years really learning the companies, have then moved onwards to California. And so suddenly Dublin becomes a place from which large numbers of people actually go to corporate headquarters. And the number of businesses that I've been in, you know, probably I can count in the hundreds, individuals who would have started out in the Dublin campus who have now risen to very, very senior leadership roles by moving to other parts of the world. So in many ways, what started small has become big, but by continually getting the right policy instruments in place over a period of time. And I think the other thing that you see here is the technology firms work really closely with government, with Danny's organization, because ultimately, and with the universities, you know, in many ways, you know, we're huge supporters of Andrew. You know, from our point of view, we want the Trinity Business School to be remarkably successful, because in many ways that's going to bring more and more fantastic graduates who are going to come here that we'd love to hire. And in that situation, this virtuous cycle of all the pieces working together kind of creates a spectacular advantage for Ireland. And I think in many ways, as Danny talked about, he led off by talking about an economy that's grown by 100% in 6 years. That's pretty remarkable. But again, all coming from a reaction to the challenges that we had a number of years ago. Ireland dealt with those challenges and moved forward, and with the kind of the strength of the intellectual capability of the people here and all the people who've come in, we've managed to put that together and drive forward. So let me stop now, and I look forward to further conversations as we go through the event.
Great, thank you, John. I think you've given everyone a great insight into the an ecosystem in action, actually. So let's stay on that theme for the moment, and continue to address the. I mean, I think there's a lot of scholars out there who are quite interested in terms of the choice of location of businesses, how the whole ecosystem is created and developed. So let's maybe delve into the question of why businesses are choosing Dublin, but also let me also throw into the mix an alternative hypothesis, which is you know, that, well, maybe some of this isn't as real as we think, and that some of it is maybe due to tax breaks, and maybe, you know, even throw in the point about the 25% growth a few years ago. Is that you know, does that not demonstrate that some of this is a bit of a mirage, and that no economy can grow at 25% on a flick of a switch, which Ireland seemed to have done? So maybe throw out both of those perspectives, and maybe ask Katrina, do you want to take up the question of why Ireland, and how much of it is real?
Yeah, happy to try anyway, Andrew. So I think if I go back to the early days in Microsoft, I think when we started out, there were three kind of reasons why we picked Ireland as a manufacturing site. One was access to labour force. Two was it was a cost-effective market, and some would debate whether that's still true. And third was, of course, tax, because back then there was a manufacturing tax breaks as part of the offering. But over the 35 years, we've really created Ireland as a strategic footprint for Microsoft. We now have the only site that has our EMEA operations center. We've EMEA digital sales. We've a data center that hosts a huge amount of European data. We do all of the design and build out for all of our data centers in EMEA. That team sits in Dublin. We have our finance operations functions all here. So we as a leadership team, and John touched on this, the manager and leadership capability, really put on the green jersey of trying to figure out how do we stay relevant in the evolution of a company, from manufacturing to internet to IoT to digital transformation. How do you still stay relevant to the company? And how do you continue to encourage the company to see Ireland as a strategic base for the company? And we've always been very conscious of growing value for the company. So we haven't been afraid to remove portfolios over that period of time and divest of different areas where we really felt there wasn't value and there was a better solution for the company. We've outsourced a lot of our manufacturing. We've outsourced a lot of our non-value add services so that we could continue to become, to drive up the value chain. And I think when I step back now and I talk to the executives in corporate and ask why Ireland, we talk about access to Europe. I mean, Ireland provides easy access to a European market of over 500 million consumers. It also gives us access to talent, being able to have like I think it's 30% of our population come from 40 different markets. So we have a really international workforce in Ireland. When you think about talent, we think about the quality of the Irish graduates is significant. Youngest population in Europe, 17% of our population in Ireland is international. Ireland is #1 in the world from a flexibility and adaptability of workforce. It ranks in the top 5 in the world for the most productive workforce, the top 5 for the most motivated workforce. So attracting talent and having great people works for us in Ireland. And then there's an ease of doing business. I mean, Forbes ranks Ireland as #4 best country in the world for business. Ease of access to the Eurozone, the only English-speaking country as now within the Eurozone, as John mentioned, when England exits. And then Ireland is #1 in the world for inward investment by quality and value. So that talent pool, that access to Europe is critical. But then there is an element of that multinational environment. We have an ecosystem here of headquartered operations of multinationals, and we connect at a leadership level together. We share best practices. We work together on policy issues that will benefit the whole economy and the whole ecosystem. It's a super place to do business. You know, you can set up a company very quickly here. You can plug and play into infrastructure. You've got lots of large multinationals who are happy to help Indigenous and small businesses grow and scale and mentor those businesses. And then there is, when you think about tax, there is the favorable R&D tax credit that helps reduce cost of staff by about 20%. And you can get training grants. So there are things that the government has done that makes it an attractive place to be. But tax is not the single driving purpose for why Microsoft or a lot of other companies are here in Ireland. It is about that talent. It is about access to the European market, and it is about innovation and driving innovation across the ecosystem.
Great, thanks, Katrina. So, I mean, I think some of the lessons begin to emerge here is that, I mean, while, you know, tax breaks might help kickstart something, I think in terms of creating a cluster and a sort of agglomeration effect where you get the snowballing effects, is that you need the companies to evolve to actually to start to invest and develop their high value added activities in the country. And hence your announcement just a few days ago about the hiring 200 engineers is obviously very reassuring for people for Ireland in terms of Microsoft's future here. And then of course the other thing that both yourself and John, the other speakers, have raised is in relation to the whole ecosystem around the institutions, but also in terms of the interaction between not just the companies and building up that cluster, but also I'm glad to hear John say in relation to the universities too. And indeed, the international labour force, which I think, you know, immigration is always regarded as in the past is slightly negatively from an Irish point of view but as migrants have switched from being low skilled to high skilled, they've gone abroad, risen to senior executive positions there, and been able to bring that expertise and experience back, and that's played so the international dimension of the Irish workforce. Now, I'm conscious, Danny, that I know. That as we move over to you, that our audience here, we're probably blue in the face listening to us talk about Ireland here, but obviously everything we're talking about is extremely relevant for business development, industrial development generally. So I suppose in addressing the question I was asking about the hypothesis, is it a tax break or is there something substantial? I suppose maybe if I could throw in on top of that as you answer, I mean, if you've got somebody out there looking at it from, you know, perspective of another country around Europe or elsewhere, I mean, what is the best approach? And I know that some of our speakers, as Katrina says, it took decades, but what is the best approach to try to replicate what Ireland's done here in this clustering and agglomeration?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Well, you know, tongue in cheek, you might say, well, you wouldn't start the way we started, right? So we were a whole century of getting things wrong when we got our independence, and our standards of living fell, and we couldn't even provide a livelihood to the people who were born here for a very long time. So a bad base is always a good place to have a good growth rate. But the drama in Ireland, I think, in the last number of years, and we'll answer the second part of your question, is to what John, Imelda, and Katrina were saying. This has been an open society and open around property rights. That idea of the institutions, while they have dysfunctions to them, was a very strong base. The strong base here is an open society, but the security and certainty was really strong. What's become dramatic is a global phenomenon. Like 12 years ago, the top 10 Standard & Poor's companies would be tangible companies that have had tangible assets. There were oil and gas companies, there were General Electric. Moving on 10 years, and what you see is that intangible assets are the main driver. In the Pareto 80-20 rule, you know, if you go back to the 1980s, it was 80% tangible assets in the top 500 companies in the world, 20% intangible assets. That's completely flipped now, it's the other way around. And so intangible assets can move their location in a way that tangible assets can't. And so the corporate tax regime, which the OECD have been developing on the back of the G20's concerns about the movement of value to intangibility, has really been favorable to Ireland and companies, because they can be certain that Ireland had a dynamism, but also a certainty. And we saw movement effectively from the Caribbean islands over the last decade towards Europe. But the choice of where in Europe to land, going back to those institutions, was that the common law legal system is actually one of the great advantages, because it's not codified. It's not having to be written down. And so it can deal with novelty. It can deal with the ambiguity of intangibility much faster. And there's only two places that offered that proposition within the EU of effective scale, which was Britain and Ireland. And that's where the tournament was in the years 2000 to 2014. The aggressiveness of the Cameron-led government with a patent income box of 10%. Ireland retaliated with the research, with the knowledge development box. But what we started to see was corporate balance sheets started to move their ownership structures into Europe. Probably the one that didn't happen is probably the most interesting one. Pfizer has attempted to become European twice in the last 7 years. First by becoming British through the AstraZeneca deal, then by becoming Irish through the Allergan deal. That's the exception to prove the rule. It didn't happen, but most other, what you might pejoratively call inversions, have occurred. And so the 25%, as you mentioned, was actually in value terms 33% shift in 2015 in Irish GDP, was a function of the balance sheet movement, 350 billion euros of balance sheet movement in that single year alone. And the reason why they came to Ireland in that particular year is that Britain had created uncertainty for itself in the year 2014. It wasn't even Brexit. It was the Scottish referendum that created the uncertainty. The potential breakup of the United Kingdom was a moment of pause to say, where will we put our assets? And so the fact that the only rival that Ireland had in that BEPS world, Britain, has created this huge uncertainty during this decade, meant it was a winner takes all. It's increasing returns to scale. And when you're in a small, certain economy, increasing returns to scale by what is an oil find, the modern day equivalent of oil is intellectual property embedded in corporate balance sheets, it's perfectly explicable why a country like Ireland could grow by 100%. In fact, could grow by even more. We just had numbers out yesterday showing the Irish economy will have grown during 2020 in GDP terms. You will not see the coronavirus taking it into the negative zone by the time the year is over. So you get these increasing returns to scale, but it's not because of corporate tax rate, it's because of the certainty, because anybody in multinational companies know the tax will be blended right throughout the world. No corporations will want to have an egregious tax number. It creates too much problems. And so the blending across jurisdictions, it is increasingly other factors than taxation, but taxation is obviously one of the key considerations for Ireland because of its certainty. That's why the 12.5% corporation tax rate is not going to go down, because the certainty is around what it is. And so, you know, there might be an incentive to actually put it down in a country, as other societies have now lower corporation tax rates in Ireland, even within the EU, was actually the certainty is where the premium is, not actually the rate.
Very, very interesting. Danny, I suppose there's a question there of regardless of all this, would these companies have come here without the tax break?
Probably not back in the 70s or 80s and so on. As Katrina said, it was factors like tax was a factor. If that was absent, and if you had a penalizing tax and an attitude towards capital that was ambiguous about whether it would get seized, of course, that wouldn't be a place to go. But the incentive to kind of kickstart it, to show you can do it. But as Katrina said, it was as access to market, the European market in terms of the single market about to develop in 1987 into the 1992 project, but also the availability of educated workforce. And one of the things in our tragedy, and it is a tragedy because the island of Ireland is the only place on earth to have a lower population today than in the 1840s. And this is the diaspora from around the world, is that tragedy is that Irish people are globalized. They will move and are lateral and flexible. Like people from the west coast of Ireland are more likely to take up a job in London than somebody north of Birmingham is likely to go down to London to take that job. That's an econometric fact. And so what we see is that this openness, this global nature of it, is that Ireland has really got lucky, having practiced for a very long time to get this point. And if you'd like to, taking lessons from other jurisdictions, and touching is, if you like to see this is a new form of colonization. Colonization of the assets here are actually the intangible assets, but other societies who built up their wealth portfolios took tangible assets in the past from other jurisdictions. And so the historical record is that Ireland, having missed out on some of the waves of industrialization 1, 2, and 3, is now in the vanguard of industrialization 4.0 on the back of setting up a society and an economy that was in the right place at the right time for this form of colonization of assets. And so I really object very strongly, and will defend it all the time, from taking lessons from other societies who actually built up originally from their colonization of tangible assets taken from other jurisdictions, including Ireland.
Okay. So listen, on that topic, then let's maybe move on to Brexit. And Brexit is something that's hugely relevant for every country in Europe, obviously particularly the UK and Ireland, but beyond. And of course, we see in the news today that the negotiations are at a tough stage, with the president of the Commission now having to step in to try to forge a deal. And Danny, you've been in the spotlight a bit for a while, so maybe I'll start with Imelda. Imelda, what's your view on Brexit?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a serious question as you ask it today in terms of where we are at. I think about Brexit, and I've thought about it for a long time, in terms of a really strategic question, first of all, a question that has created a lot of uncertainty for businesses, and businesses could generally do with some certainty right now. I think businesses, we're usually used to managing risk, and us as business leaders are paid to manage risk, but the combination of Brexit and COVID is a lot of uncertainty. And today, as you said, we know right now there isn't a deal. As of last night, some serious challenges in terms of what potentially needs to happen, and the fact there are significant matters on which we are a ways apart. And I use we as a very, very broad term for across Europe. And that points to us getting very close to the end of the year without the certainty that businesses might ultimately like to have. as I stand back further, in the ideal world, we would have a plan around goods, we'd have a plan around services, we'd have a plan around people. And some of that will hopefully come, but I think at this stage we have to recognize that we're going to face into the new year. And it's more likely that we will face into challenges. We know that there's going to be, customs procedures, there's going to be paperwork, there's going to be challenges potentially in physical infrastructure around roads and literally getting product into the UK. And when I take all of that, I think about it, and I think about much of the discussion here today, and think about the impact of Brexit, and say ultimately, to my own mind, and people can have different views, hopefully we'll have some certainty soon. And with that certainty, that will be a point of pause for some organizations. It'll cause businesses to have to pause and think about whether their business is going to actually manage to easily trade with the UK or have really big challenges. I spent 15 years from farm to fork, and so I've thought a lot about what is Brexit going to mean, particularly for Irish food making its way into the UK. And similarly, thought a lot about timber and products that, while timber itself wouldn't have a tariff on it, in certain scenarios, MDF and OSB, so the byproducts of timber, the panel boards, they would have a 6% tariff, which could make them very challenged competitively in the UK. So when we think about it, when I think about it, I think we have to stand back and say many businesses are really likely to be challenged. They're going to have to diversify. I'm hoping that ways forward will be found, Andrew, but when you take everything that we have spoken about here today, and I'm struck by so much of what I've been thinking about in terms of how Ireland and Europe manages Brexit, it is going to be potentially about innovation for some businesses. It's going to be about diversification and potentially moving further up the value chain, but also recognizing that if I take Ireland for a moment, and forgive me, but we are in a unique position, not only in terms of our reliance on the UK in many ways, but the juxtaposition and the location that we have. Having spent some time in Asia, I think about Ireland being halfway between Asia and the US. So I think we are going to have to potentially rethink some of what we do. Food is going to remain incredibly important. The question is, are we going to be able to export food into the UK, which is an economy that ultimately doesn't have full food security? How are we going to make that happen positively and be competitive in that market? And if we can't, well, what happens and how do we diversify? We've talked today about skills, we've talked about innovation, but also the pace of change. And there was reference earlier by some of the speakers around the fact that so much change has happened this year, and it's been forced upon us by COVID. I think we have to face the fact that Brexit potentially will create some momentum where a lot of businesses are going to need to refocus on further change in order to figure out how to go forward. I wish I had the answer as to whether we'll have a deal, a no deal, a hard deal, a soft deal. We don't know, but hopefully we will get to a point very soon where there'll be at least some certainty and businesses can plan forward for the impacts of some of the knowns. So with that, I'm going to pause and pass back to yourself.
Okay, great. Thanks, Imelda. And Danny, would you like to pick up on that in terms of, I suppose, looking at a broader perspective? But again, I think in terms of where do you think things are going to settle down to? I mean, maybe if we take if negotiations break down, I mean, what really is what does the landscape look like up ahead?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of standoff and so on. I still believe that a deal will be done. It might actually be done in the time frame of the next few days. I think it'll spill over, but it's pretty incidental. To Imelda's point, the damage and the uncertainty for businesses has been caused already. This will be just on the fact. But Britain leaving the European Union is an economic order change. Tragic as COVID is, it's noise. Brexit is a signal, and it's a signal for the future. So it's a very dramatic change for Ireland, and so naturally there's a lot of viewpoint on the short-term turbulence of changing over the year. But actually, that's just about goods in the main, whether there's going to be tariffs or quotas on goods, significant as it is to large proportions of business. But there's 4 freedoms within the European Union. Goods is only one freedom. Services, increasingly our economy is more determined by services than actually tangible goods. And so issues around equivalence, about regulatory, all of these things are still up in the mix. So Brexit will go on and on in terms of negotiations even after this weekend. Capital movements, what's going to happen in the financial centre that is London, and the long-term consequences of the run out of that. And the other one is probably as significant for Ireland, given its location, is people. And then, Andrew, that the bit that actually then really matters is the political overlay. If Brexit results in a potential breakup with the United Kingdom, that has huge knock-on consequences for the island of Ireland, particularly given that United Kingdom is on the top of the island in Northern Ireland. And that protocol around Northern Ireland means that the island of Ireland now strategically is at the centre of potential trade deals, because Northern Ireland, under the protocol, is both within the EU and in the UK simultaneously, meaning that the UK-US trade deal, the UK-EU trade deal, and most significantly, the need for a new EU-US trade deal with the Biden administration means that the island of Ireland shows up in like a Venn diagram in the center of all three trade deals. So this week, these couple of weeks, or the noise and the drama of the next couple of days, is by far overblown in its ultimate long-term significance. But Brexit is a huge, huge deal, and the die is cast.
But if I may ask you then, Danny, I mean, and I know looking into the crystal ball is always difficult, but I mean, what do you think the landscape is going to look like with Brexit in, let's say, 5 years' time? What'll be significantly different in 5 years' time to let's say today, or even 10 years' time?
Well, let's deal with a positive, and I want to deal with a positive. I genuinely hope that Britain stabilizes as a society, as a bulwark for globalization and for the EU, that we actually get into a position where I believe that was a huge mistake, leaving the European Union, but it does actually send a signal to the European Union. If you lose a G7 country, G8 country, you really have to take a look as to why that happened. And so it could well be a transformative effect if Britain actually stabilizes and becomes what I believe it will be, a really strong, aggressive competitor on the western seaboard of Europe, a place that we've had for some time. And I think that's potentially going to get us to raise our game. So I'm actually hopeful in the medium term that Britain will stabilize and actually will be an exemplar. And that will put a lot of pressure for all of us in the European Union right now to react and to put competitiveness and productivity firmly up the highlight of the European Union, which I don't think the European Union has been functioning strongly in the last number of years. And we see this in the standoff with how we handle data and how people are approaching tech companies within the EU. It's looking backwards, not to the future. So hopefully, good thing out of Brexit might concentrate the mind.
Great, thanks, Danny. So, okay, well, I mean, moving on to one of the other big changes, of course, that's taken place that the panel have talked about is the impact of COVID-19, and I suppose one of the big things it's catapulted innovation forward, particularly in relation to remote working, particularly in relation into the digitization of business, and of course in our sector here in relation to this conference, digitization of education, and indeed here we are today, the 20th anniversary of the EURAM conference, and it's the first ever entirely digital conference, and I think it seems to be going reasonably well. We'll know from the feedback at the end. But I was just saying to some of the panel earlier that you know, in terms of some of the coffee breaks and so on, that when the conference was being set up, we thought may not actually work. You know, I've instead worked quite well actually, and I think a lot of that is that the whole COVID-19 experiment to some extent has got people familiar with this online environment, that people can meet people for the first time ever, and so on. So I want to move on to the issue then of remote working, and John, if I may start with you in terms of what impact you think it will have. I suppose maybe if I just may throw one vision in there, John, for you to address is the issue of working. I mean, at the moment, you know, if you take a look at the Google offices in Dublin, I mean, I used to get the train into work, and every day when I went past, you'd see the flags from different countries on different floors of various buildings, and you'd have the, you know, a Belgian flag, an Italian flag, and so on. And of course, those workers now are all, I guess most of them are probably back in their own countries continuing to do their jobs. So I suppose with remote working, I mean, what impact do you think it's going to have on business generally, but also maybe on the allocation of work in the international labor market?
So I think we're going to have to look at that by kind of like almost segmenting the workforce. So I think in the first instance, Andrew, I think, so first of all, I think actually companies and countries have done a remarkable job in effect getting people up and running, working from not in the office. And I think we saw that what COVID did was it forced the completion of digital projects in weeks that previously had taken years of not getting anywhere. And I think it says, first of all, we've got the technical backbone to make these things happen. So I think what you now see is that people are looking for much more flexibility. And I think in many ways, people are looking for some element of working from home. We've been running a series of surveys, and we survey our team probably about every 8 to 10 weeks. And what we've been discovering is very few people don't want to come back to the office at all. But also very few people want to be back in the office 5 days a week. So it's going to be some element of a combination as you go through it. However, as you start to bring it down, I think what we start to see is the individuals who've probably done the best in terms of kind of COVID, in terms of kind of managing, you know, what they have to do, managing their career aspirations as well, because at the same time, kind of careers need to be built at a point like this, are probably people who've been in the workforce for over 10 years. And what they have is they actually have the lingua franca of working with people. They understand really how to collaborate. They understand the official source of information and the unofficial source of information, and how to find and how to make that work. What we see is, you know, a large part of work is about learning how to work. And so for people in early career, there's been some challenges because they haven't been close to their coaches, their managers, their leaders, who usually will intervene to help them with some good sage advice as to how to kind of modify their approach to certain things. And that missing of that kind of becomes an element of an issue. I think other things, like for example, during the course of the month, I actually opened an office in a country in Mexico. We opened a brand new office in Mexico. None of the team in our Mexican office have ever been to our office. We onboarded them. They've done a fantastic job, and they have been remarkable. And interestingly, when we actually did our recently employee survey, EVS, or employee voice survey, they were the happiest group of people we had in the company. And so that was pretty remarkable as you start to look at that, like a group of people who've never been to the office, they've never met other people, we've started them remotely, and they're doing absolutely brilliantly. And for me, they have been a beacon of hope as to the types of change that people can embrace. But I think what you're looking at is, I think what we're doing today is we're in our third quarter of not working in the office, right? And about to move to the fourth quarter or so. Full quarters. The reality is, I think, the office is a very important part of productive business life, because it's where conversations take place. And in large place, it's where the innovation takes place, because people have the water cooler conversations. Having said that, it's no longer going to be as large a portion of our lives, because I think people will be looking for more flexible working arrangements. I think that level of flexibility will be kind of earned through maybe prior performance, where people have comfort in you and they in the organization. And over a period of time, I think people will probably spend a couple of days in the office, a couple of days remotely. I actually think this is going to provide some very, very significant benefits in some parts of family formation, where people in the early stages of family formation have huge difficulties in terms of the commutes to work while trying to take care of young families. And this level of flexibility is going to provide advantages. and stop really important cohorts stepping out of the workforce for periods of time. And I think that's going to be really, really positive. So I think we're looking at something that I think is more about flexibility. And I think what will be left after COVID, I think, is a much more flexible labor force from the point of view of where they want to work. I think the other thing, though, we have to think about is you've got to be incredibly disciplined to continue to work from home on a regular basis. Because as I talk to large members of my team, there's almost that feeling, that corrosive influence where they're always at work, kind of almost from the point in time that they get up, drop in and out, take their laptop up. And so how do we kind of effectively help people when they're in a position where they're remote, when they're taking advantage of flexible working locations, that in effect they're not doing it 15 hours of the day? Because in that situation, that's not going to be good for people. And so that, I think, is going to be the next range of things they're going to have to make. But I'm not somebody who thinks this is the end of the office. I think we may end up having different types of offices, and we may have larger numbers of smaller offices as opposed to one giant office here and there. But at the end of the day, I think within businesses, we're going to have around the world, we're going to have kind of core locations. Katrina talked about every function in Dublin other than at Redmond. And I think what we'll have within companies is we'll nominate locations which will be our anchor locations, where we have significant numbers of functions and capabilities. And around that, I think you'll actually have clusters. And here we're going to come back again to the concept of the cluster. And I think the type of cluster that we've kind of built up in Ireland from the point of view as a country, I think you're going to have clusters within companies. And those clusters will be locations where they have 5, 10, 15, 20 functions, and where people will want to go to for a period of time. And sometimes it may well be the parts of a career, maybe going to one of the clusters for a period of time, then going back to your home location, into a cluster for a role back elsewhere. But it may not be that you're in one location forever. But I think there will be clusters within companies, and then other locations may well become more from the point of view, you'll kind of provide office space to enable people to have a separation from their work, from their home, so they're in a position to do some work. So I think you're going to start to see a bit of a mix within that whole situation, Andrew. But I think we're in the early days yet. I think we've benefited here in Ireland that our broadband network has held up particularly well. And I think as broadband becomes more ubiquitous, you're going to provide the ability to people to do that, which heretofore they haven't been able to do. So let me stop it there.
Great, thanks, John. I think all of our speakers are and indeed our main audience here today are researchers, and I think one of the themes that seems to be emerging here in terms of areas for research in terms of business and management is the key role of clusters and ecosystems and building critical mass, not just in the geographic area but within companies and so on. So we may get time at the end to actually ask our panel about key areas of research that they personally think would be useful for the business school community to address. But your point about families is very interesting there. I think again, another area that people can do research on, let's say in a few years' time, to see if we move to more intensive remote working, where it actually does it have an impact on fertility rates and so on. And but I guess the other thing you're mentioning there, John, also is the, when you look at commuting and so on, it's the lowest paid workers who can't typically afford to live in the city, and they face a kind of a double penalty there, to be the lowest paid in an organization, but then have to do the longest commute because they can only afford to live far away. And so certainly I think, and we can see that in the universities, is that those who live far away, have benefited quite a lot in the as a result of the move to remote working. So moving,
Andrew, if I could maybe just put one more point into the mix. I think in many ways, I think technology definitely has enabled remote working, but I don't think it can replace empathy and human interaction. And in large parts, it's helping, But I do think as we kind of go along, people will be looking for the mix, that whole ability, because humans are creative. And by its very nature, sometimes in kind of having conversations with people, you're able to elicit something that you hadn't previously thought of. And out of that then comes the creative function to come up with another answer. And it may well be, we may need to be better organized. We may only do that once a week because you're in the office once a week. But I don't think we should think that we're ever going to move towards a situation where this is the end of human connection, because that is so, so important to what we do. And in many ways, what we've learned is that we've been able to keep the trains running very well over the last 9 months. And many businesses and companies are going on to the next level now. But it becomes hugely important. And what we see is the companies that are doing well are the companies that are really doing a good job of communicating. Because in large part, what we have to do is we actually have to both use technology to communicate, but not to forget that there's a different message for different people. And this kind of like a broadcast message to 1,000 people doesn't necessarily work. We're going to have to nuance it so that people understand their context. Because more important than ever, context is king. And the importance of the leadership of a business or the leadership of a society or the leadership of a government is to use technology as a medium, but to get the communications right as people kind of go through something like COVID. And I think that then comes back to the whole area of the office. And I think the office will become more important in certain aspects and maybe less so in others. But I think it's going to become more blended as we go forward.
I think I would just add to that, John, that in the research that we've done, I think culture becomes a really important part of a company and environment and leadership. And the research has shown that, you know, companies who have an innovative culture where they empower their employees, where they have really open communication between managers and employees, and the role of the manager is really critical. And there's a strong inclusive vision from the top, are the ones that are finding it much easier to be productive, to survive, to have engaged employees in a hybrid working model rather than a necessarily remote. I think hybrid will be the future of working. But that culture piece becomes more important. And from a manager and leadership perspective, investing more in that, because even ourselves in Microsoft, we had put so much into our new campus and the building being iconic and representing our culture. And then suddenly that was gone. So you have to rethink all of that and start pivoting on purpose and trying to get employees engaged with the purpose rather than the physical building that you're in, because that's ultimately how they want to engage and where they're going to feel like they're having impact regardless of where they're physically present. So it does have a big shift for leaders and managers to rethink their strategy around culture.
Great. Well, I mean, I think that's from both you certainly a big statement. It's certainly in terms of the, you know, anyone who's thinking that the remote working is going to, you know, remove to 100% remote working. You got the CEOs of two of the two very influential digital companies saying categorically it's going to be a hybrid model. I think is, and I think that would certainly resonate with our experience at the university, is that when we return, we will. We definitely will return physically, but certainly there will be more remote working than there was before. So it's about the proportion rather than. So I think. Okay, well, so let's maybe move on to Danny. I mean, Danny, in terms of the businesses applying, I mean, I suppose there's a dimension there that employees are now going to want their cake and eat it. They'll want the office and they'll want the home office. How are businesses going to manage this going forward?
Yeah, look, I think that's a real challenge. I mean, at the moment, the kind of spirit that everybody got together globally to say, this is transformative, we're going to move location. You know, from a very narrow business perspective, you potentially are looking at financing two infrastructures, you know, the infrastructure at home and the infrastructure at the office. And while the desire is on the blend, the capacity to actually be able to run two systems will have cost implications. And also cost implications are going to come from the employees as well, in terms of if home is now the workplace, what's that going to mean in terms of the the costs and the legislation around, you know, when are you going down for a coffee and you fall over the cat? Is that a workplace accident, or is that something that happened just when you're at home? You know, these are serious points in terms of the adaptation. The other piece, when you were asking about research, Andrew, I think what we're talking about here is a disembodied economy with intangible assets, and some rules change. And myself and yourself first met in economics class back in the 1980s. Now the characteristics of, you know, non-rival, sunken costs, scalability, synergies, these are changing the paradigm for the world, and now actually is tangible consequences for business leaders day to day. You know, last thing I'd say on this is that, you know, when we were in college, and one thing that struck me, both of us lectured in Ireland and in Britain, but the convention of whether the lecture started on the hour or 10 past the hour could confuse one, because you had to get from somewhere, right? There had to be a convention. And it's funny, we haven't actually, well, my disembodiment at the moment, we haven't actually got to the convention yet. That's when should the meeting start, on the hour or 5 minutes past the hour, and the amount of chaos that kind of ensues. And the only bit of feeling normal is when you get to tell somebody you're on mute. You know, it's the only kind of non-corporate feel right now. So I think these conventions and these things that as humans we need, there's a lot of things to be learned yet. It's as John said, it's too soon to call the death of the office. I think that the blended approach is definitely where to go, but there's a lot of costs, a lot of conventions that are going to be needed before we can say that's been a successful transformation.
Great, thanks, Danny. So we've talked about Brexit, we've talked about digitization, remote working, and we've also talked a lot about ecosystems and location of business and clusters and critical mass. I suppose the key area we haven't addressed, and we'll do so now, is in relation to the climate change and the climate emergency. So how are businesses planning to address that? I'll start with Katrina, because as we know, Microsoft have made a big declaration in this regard. So I'll pass over to you.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Yes, we have. I mean, Microsoft's going to accelerate their progress towards a more sustainable future by obviously reducing our environmental footprint, accelerating research, and then helping our customers build sustainable solutions and advocating for policies that benefit the environment. So there's a lot of elements to what we've come out with and said we aspire to. And we also believe that while the world needs to reach a net zero, those of us in industries and business who can afford to move faster and go further should. So our commitment, which we published earlier this year, was that by 2030, Microsoft would be carbon negative. And by 2050, we would remove from the environment all carbon that the company has emitted since it was created back in 1975. So it's a big, bold ambition. So we've recognized that progress requires not just a bold goal, but a detailed plan. So what have we been doing for the last year? We've been launching an aggressive program to cut out carbon emissions by more than half by 2030, both in our direct emissions and then our entire supply chain. And we're funding this in part by expanding our internal carbon fee. That's been in place since 2012, and we increased it last year, and we're starting to charge not only for our direct emissions, but also for our supply and value chains. And we've also launched an initiative to use Microsoft technology to help our suppliers and customers around the world reduce their own carbon footprint. And we have a new $1 billion climate innovation fund that we're using to accelerate global development of carbon reduction, capture and removal technologies. And we've also committed to making carbon reduction an explicit aspect of our procurement policy, so that we will not leverage companies who are not also committed to the environment and to carbon and sustainability. Here in Ireland, then, we've been delighted that we're playing our part in delivering that mission. We've launched there over the last few weeks a project with SSE Electricity to install and manage internet connected solar panels on the rooftops of 27 primary and secondary schools across the country. And through that project, which we've invested over €1 million in, we've had the ambition to prove the viability of distributed energy generation and to open up the energy saving and carbon reduction potential of rooftop solar across Ireland and the world. And over the next 15 years, it's expected that the solar panels will produce enough clean energy to offset more than 2.1 million kilograms of harmful CO2 emissions. So on top of that, we've had an airband project, which is using TV white space. We've been working with Teagasc on precision farming and trying to give access to that last mile broadband access. But in the last year up in Cavan, so that they're doing some research on that precision farming. But we've also partnered with the Department of Rural Community Development and local LGMA, the local government agency, to expand that airband initiative into disadvantaged areas, so that second level students in DESH schools for their duration of their senior cycle can have access to broadband using this technology. And then we're currently in the process of working with Science Foundation Ireland, and we'll be announcing in the next couple of weeks a significant research initiative that will look at carbon sequestration in the different land types and soil types that we have in Ireland, and how that can be leveraged not just here in Ireland but globally to have impact on carbon emissions from land and soil. So really interesting stuff going on, but a lot more for us to do. So I'll hand back over to you, and I'm sure we'll have lots of questions on that area.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. And I think that really sort of also throws the gauntlet down to the universities too. I think we've been, as an international industry, a bit slow out of the blocks in terms of declaring our own carbon footprint agenda, although a few universities are now starting to do so. But yeah, it's great to see Microsoft not only address an aggressive target in terms of a short-term one, but also, as you say, a negative carbon footprint, and certainly that's the commitment to offset all of the prior carbon by 2050. That's fantastic. So Imelda, then I think you probably have the closing remarks here. We're actually nearly out of time. So tell us about the forestry industry, and of course, if I may just slightly, you mentioned biodiversity. Obviously, carbon offset and planting more trees is key, but what every region needs is trees that are mainly indigenous to the area to actually maintain the biodiversity, because that's obviously a key challenge, and David Attenborough has played a major role in bringing that to our teams. Over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and it's what you've mentioned there, climate and biodiversity. We absolutely have an emergency in both. We've been hearing about carbon for some time, and I always think about carbon as it's almost like an intangible, we can't see it, but some of the biodiversity challenges that the world is facing are a little bit more tangible, and in some instances you can see them directly, and in other instances you need a microscope, but one way or the other there are real questions to answer for us as society in terms of the biodiversity emergency as well. And the question that foresters need to ask today, and forestry businesses, because ultimately trees clean the air we breathe. You know, it sounds lovely, but it absolutely is true. The question that we have to ask as society today in terms of how we increase the carbon sequestrations that's achieved by trees, but equally importantly, the point that Katrina has raised around the carbon sequestration that happens in different soils. We have to learn from the past, but now as we look forward, we have to ask ourselves the critical question of what is the right tree in the right place for the right objective. And if the objective in an area is biodiversity, then that determines a specific type of tree. And there is absolutely a school of thought that indigenous trees are most important for biodiversity. There's also a lot of science that demonstrates that other species bring huge value as well. What we have to ultimately do today, though, is figure out the right balance. And as we think about forestry, I would absolutely say we recognize that Ireland had 1% of forest cover in at the turn of the last century. We're at 11% today. We need to get to 18%. And as we build that, we have to recognize that some of the things that were done in the past in forestry, the trees were, the soil that certain trees were planted on, had we times differently and known more, we might have done things differently. The exact same thing applies to business. And we have to recognize that both are evolving together. The challenge we face now is that forestry must deliver multiple benefits. It can no longer be about jobs and wood. It can no longer be about carbon. It can no longer be about biodiversity in any of those individual areas. And it can't be just social and recreation. We have to deliver a balance for society with an intergenerational asset that delivers on all fronts. And I would just close my own remarks by saying that I think the similar challenges in business, and businesses have to figure out the multiple benefits that they can bring to society. So that together we can all tackle the climate and biodiversity emergency so that we pass the planet on to the next generation in a better way than we found it. For perhaps most of us who are here at the conference, we've depleted the world as an asset over the last 20, 30, 40 years. We do need to work to put it back. And I better pause there. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Well, Imelda, I think that's a great point to end on. I think I'd like to thank our panel. I think everyone has really benefited from getting a real insight to all these different industries, and also getting an insight into facing businesses and so on. So thank you, Imelda, Katrina, John, and Danny, and everybody enjoy the rest of the conference. So thank you all.